The dawn of the space age would be commenced with the Cold War in high gear in the 1950s. Initially, the US believed to be in a superior position in space technology, but everything would change with the launching of Sputnik. Realizing their apparent failure to advance in space-related technologies, President Eisenhower would sign the National Aeronautics and Space Act on July 29, 1958, in response to Soviet's political victory. This day would be monumental for America, as it set up the foundation that would eventually lead all space-related tasks: NASA. The founding of this organization would lead the forefront of the space race with the Soviet Union for many years to come, and thus was a foundation for the success that the United States would achieve in the future. Without this day, many would be left wondering where we would have started our journey to the impossible. In hindsight, this was probably the first important event in America's decorated space history.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Without this day in American history, our legacy in space would never be the same. July 20th, 1969 will be a day that will never be forgotten, as it was a day that the crew of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were the first ones to land on the moon. For thousands of years, people dreamed if anyone can go to the moon, and here's the US in the perfect position to do so. It made Americans feel proud that they were the first country to do the impossible. Neil Armstrong could not have expressed that any better.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Apollo 11 was extremely important to the political success of America amidst the Cold War. It finally solidified US's presence in national fame and reminded the rest of the countries in the world that they're the greatest. Second, the success of Apollo 11 was able to meet the technological and mechanical requirements for a landing on the moon. This meant that the space program was finally more technologically advanced than the Soviet Union, a promise which was fulfilled from the National Defense Education Act. With the success of Apollo 11, it set the standard for future space expeditions, and this gave the US a major confidence that nothing is impossible. Apollo 11 will be the turning point for the space race for America. Today's fascination in space is all about Mars, and whether it has life on it, and if we can even go there. But we have to wonder when we started talking about Mars. That date would be August 20th, 1975, when the Viking 1 was launched. Its purpose was to not only study and photograph the surface of Mars, but also, more importantly, find if life was present. It found that the planet had the essential keys for life on Earth, but its thin atmosphere and ozone layer would have caused any life that was existent to perish. This expedition had an enormous deal not only because we explored something outside of the moon, but for decades to come, everyone would be focused on Mars and its mysteries. These doubts and uncertainties caused America to plan many more voyages in the near future. Despite many failures occurring due to the trouble of landing on a planet, we have hit a golden age of Mars explorations, with many rovers either present or being launched in the future, like the Opportunity and Curiosity rovers. Unlike the other full moments, the legacy of this expedition is not yet fully cemented, as we have many more goals to accomplish at Mars, including one day to put a man on the red planet. Our riding successes from the Apollo 11 mission would continue well up until the Challenger disaster. Its purpose was to serve as a test vehicle for the shuttle space program, which was to help transport, repair, and monitor the satellites in space. On that day, the Challenger exploded 4 miles up into the atmosphere because the extremely cold weather that morning caused the deterioration of the seal boosters. Regarded as one of the greatest NASA tragedies in American space history, it had immense impacts on future expeditions. First and foremost was the decision to revert back to rocket-based launchers rather than shuttles and satellite missions, which NASA was trying to pursue in the Challenger. The accident also reminded Americans of how exploration in space can be so expensive and how costly it can be if something goes wrong. The fact that NASA had to increase their budget to replace the Challenger can be seen through the budget increase from $15.5 billion from before the accident to $20 billion after the accident. The plans of going to the moon were further delayed, and even when Bush said they will get a man back on the moon, the plan was scraped off due to money problems, and Obama's presidency received more further delays, despite Obama's goal to put a man back on the moon by 2017. Other impacts included the fact that accidents still happen in space expeditions, thus instilling tentativeness and apprehension in the minds of Americans. This is evidenced by the decisions of putting civilians in space to be erased for another 20 years, until Barbara Morgan would do it in 2007. With the Challenger, our space age took a turn as we started to move to robotic forms of technology to explore other space objects. Planets in our solar system that would take years to reach is not fit for human travel, and so this telescope, which was launched on April 24, 1990, was used to exactly do that. The Hubble was made to place a major optical telescope in space. Because the lens power is unimaginable and there's no light pollution or haze present in space, there is no better place the universe's explorers should be located. Because we have not made the technology to travel at or faster than the speed of light, it's extremely difficult to explore far galaxies in space. The Hubble telescope makes up for the long distance with its jaw-dropping lens, which takes crystal clear pictures of galaxies that are hundreds or even millions of light years away. But more importantly, the legacy Hubble left behind is that the creation of this telescope marked the most significant advancement in astronomy since Galileo's telescope. Without Hubble, our view of the universe would never be the same. Without these 5 important moments in American space history, our view of space has never been the same. Our fear of failure and falling behind the Soviets persuaded us to catch up and improve our space program. With NASA leading the way, the US set itself up for future success, and nothing embodied that than the Apollo 11 mission, where it was the first to land on the moon. Even after the Challenger disaster, which persuaded the US to switch back to rockets than shuttles, the United States made the biggest advancement in astronomy since Galileo, and that was the launching of the Hubble telescope. And finally, with the Mars hysteria that has been going across the scientific medium today, we can date back our interest to the Red Planet with the launching of Viking 1. Hopefully, these 5 monumental events will not only help us pursue more goals in the future, but also allow us to make even greater memories for us to remember.